Red Dead Redemption 2 sure had a lot of clout when it first dropped out back in 2018 for PS4 and Xbox One, and I just had the privilege of playing it finally in PC. The game sure looks amazingly stunning, and Rockstar went all out to make it as realistic as possible. And besides that, it takes well over 40 to 60 hours to finish the game, and that is not even the 100% completion. So, in order to cover up this absurd amount of time, you gotta have something to hook the players to your game. And that is what we are going to discuss today. The whole narrative story of Red Dead Redemption 2, and how did Rockstar manage to create such an amazing story with one of the best character development I have ever seen in a video game. I have never played the original Red Dead Redemption, but thankfully, the story in Red Dead Redemption 2 is happening before the first story is set up, so it is more of a prequel of the game. And this is really a hard thing to pull off. The potential of messing up is too high that you might risk losing an entire franchise. Yet Rockstar did pull it off and delivered one of the greatest stories and games of the past year. And this video is going to spoil literally everything in the story, so if you plan on playing the game, this is your ticket of clicking off. The story is a fictional recreation of the American Old West in 1899. You're playing as Arthur Morgan, an outlaw following Vanderland gang. The idea is pretty straightforward. You and your friends in the gang are trying to run from lawmen and other gangs as the O'Driscolls. The narrative revolves around Dutch Vanderland, who is the leader of the gang, John Marston, whom is a well-known character being the main protagonist of the original Red Dead Redemption. As a quick note, so far there is 3 Red Dead Redemption games: Red Dead Revolver, Red Dead Redemption, and Red Dead Redemption 2. And throughout this video I won't be covering Red Dead Revolver at all, but only the first and second Red Dead Redemption. Anyway, and there is also Micah Bell. The game consists of 6 chapters and 2 epilogues, and it is also an open world game, so you have basically full control of how you play it. But we are not discussing the gameplay, but we are focusing on the story, so let's hop into the main event. The game starts with a bunch of people driving wagons in an extreme weather on top of a mountain, and then we get to meet the protagonist Arthur Morgan. After they establish to find a shelter from the severe weather, we get to know that one of the gang's character, Davey, is dead. After that, Arthur, Dutch, and Micah head outside to search for Bill and Joan, but they stumble upon a house with lights on, so they approach in order to ask for some food and whatnot, just to realize that the house was inhabited by the O'Driscolls. After a quick shooting and killing, they steal what they find in the house, and then they meet one of O'Driscoll's hostage, Miss Sadie Adler, whom is going to play a huge role in how the story progresses and also how her character develops throughout the story. The first chapter of the game acts more of a tutorial of how to play the game and the different mechanics that the game provides. But through the narrative and the conversations between each character, we understand more. The story actually starts in May 1899. After a failed heist in the thriving port town of Blackwater, Dutch and his gang are forced to flee the area and leave behind them their money that they collected and passed through the snowy mountains north to avoid the law. And basically here where chapter 1 ends, introducing the characters and basically the gameplay. Not much storytelling, but this is the base where Red Dead Redemption 2 is going to start on. Heading forward, the gang have one idea in mind, and it is to escape south, no matter what. So after starting chapter 2, Dutch set up the gang to rob a train, but not any ordinary train. It belongs to Levericus Cornwell, and he is a wealthy oil magnate, and he is not just a small character that the gang robs and that is the end of it. This robbery is gonna have some consequences, as after the robbery, Cornwall gets furious at Dutch and hires the Pinkerton Detective Agency, who sends both Agent Andrew Melton and Agent Edgar Ross. Realizing that the progress of civilization is ending, the time of outlaws, Dutch and the gang decide to gather up enough money to retire and escape the law for good. The gang relocates south to the state of New Hanover, and the gang perform numerous jobs and heists to gather enough money, as Dutch continually promises one last big heist that will secure their freedom. After a deadly shootout, the gang is forced to relocate their camp after Agent Milton discovers it. Here starts the third chapter of the game. So they head straight to Rhodes, and in there they met the Greys, which Dutch quickly befriended one of their members, Sheriff Leigh Gray. He helped capturing a couple of criminals, and that led to Leigh making Bill Williamson, Dutch and Arthur deputies, and the Braithwaites. And here where the story starts to kick in. As you progresses through the roads of roads, you understand that those rivals families are having some sort of a problem. A civil war kind of problem. Of course, as an outlaw, Dutch doesn't give a fuck about both families. He's just thinking of the best for him and his gang. So he starts helping each family without the other knowing to gain their trust, and therefore pin them against each other. But his plan is discovered, which leads to an ambush by the Greys that kills Sean, and the Braithwaites kidnapped John's son, Jack. The gang won't go easy on those actions, of course, and they're going to make both families pay. They slaughter the Greys and they head towards the Braithwaites' mansion to get Jack back, but they learn that Jack has been sold to a crime lord called Angelo Bronte. This leads to the gang to slaughtering almost every Braithwaite and burning the mansion down. Moving on, we start the new chapter, the fourth one, which called Saint Denis. Arthur, Dutch, and Marston head to Bronte's house to retrieve Jack. They plan that they have to shoot their way to get him back, but to their surprise, they find that Bronte was really good to Jack and was feeding him some weird food, as the gang said, which is basically just pasta because Bronte is from Italy. Bronte expresses his likeness to Dutch's gang and invites them to the mayor's house for his party. Of course, Dutch would accept to go just to be able to find a way to get more money to flee south as intended originally. Bill, Dutch, Hosea and Arthur attended the party as planned, and they start chatting with Bronte, just to later on reveal to them that they can make money at the trolley station, as they keep a lot of money in there. Moving forward, the gang are planning to rob a riverboat, and they have Hosea that helps Arthur cheats on poker so he wins and gets some stacks of money. The plan goes extremely well, just to turn out not in the end, and everyone starts blasting bullets at each other, but nonetheless everyone escapes with a watch that Arthur won that worth a couple $100. But that does not satisfy Dutch, and he heads with Lenny and Arthur, who didn't know at first but still follows Dutch blindly, and start robbing the trolley station. But to their surprise, there was no money at all, and it was just a setup, and Bronte trapped them as he sent dozens of cops to kill them. After shooting their way out of the problem, the gang heads to Bronte's house and kidnaps him, and as any sane, reasonable person might do, Dutch feeds him to an alligator at the swamp. And here where the shift in Dutch's character. Even John commented that what he did was outrageous.
Your philosophy books cover feeding a fella. Good goddamn alligator, Dutch.
Dutch is now convinced that there is no future for him and his family in the United States, but they still need more money. So with the help of Hosea, Arthur, Williamson, Escula, John, Lenny and Micah, they head to rob the Bank of Saint Denis to gather the rest of the money needed to run away, or to put it exactly as Dutch said,
"Now I found a friendly ship captain. He's willing to take us to Australia or Tahiti."
But little they know that the Pinkertons going to intervene, and Milton executes Hosea in front of the gang. The emotions shift and the shootout starts, which did lead to poor Lenny getting killed and John captured. The others were lucky as they escaped on a boat that was headed to Cuba. Did I just said lucky? My bad, because a storm intervenes and sinks the boat and the man was ashore, the Isle of Guarma, as a start of chapter 5. I'm not sure how I feel about this particular chapter, but probably it is the point where Dutch is not Dutch anymore, because the moment that Hosea died in the bank robbery, Dutch snapped. And I realized that I didn't speak about Hosea at all, and he is one of the major characters in the plot of the game. Hosea met Dutch at a campfire in mid-1870s. He tried to rob him just to realize that Dutch had stolen from him in the meantime. They saw the skills that each other had and they laughed about it just to team up together. Later on, the two met a teenager named Arthur Morgan who decided to take under their wing. Hosea did benefit a lot from mentoring Arthur, and eventually the gang expanded over the years to become Vanderland Gang. Hosea was the wise of the gang. He had too much knowledge about robbing and stealing, and he was the person to always mentor such huge robberies. So when Hosea died in the St. Denis Bank's robbery, Dutch didn't believe that, and that messed him up big time. And now they are stuck in an island called Guarma, where they eventually find themselves caught in a war between the tyrannical sugar plantation owners and the enslaved local population. And they start fighting with the revolutionaries to eventually win the war against the sugar plantation owners, and that grants them a boat that secures their transport to United States. But in this journey on this island, Arthur starts doubting Dutch's plan. As before fighting the war, Arthur and Dutch tries to help Javier, that was captured by the Guarma police, and Dutch made a deal with an old lady that helped them get close through a cave, just to kill her later on in a cold blood.
Pay more. Pay now.
Dutch, what are you doing? Jesus. Easy, Dutch.
And Arthur was surprised because that wasn't Dutch he knew, and also the fact that Dutch started suspecting that John is the rat who led police to St. Denis. Arthur becomes more and more doubtful of Dutch, but still helps him to secure their way back to United States. After they go back, they met the rest of the gang, just welcome more of the Pinkerton. After dealing with them, Dutch becomes more paranoid that there is a gang member who is snitching behind his back. And after relocating the camp one more time, Dutch starts rumbling one last heist, and also insisting that they must wait to liberate Joan from the prison. But Arthur and Sadie disobey his order and went to rescue John from the prison on their own, which was a success. Later on, Dutch started manipulating a group of Native Americans into a conflict with the United States Army to draw attention away from the gang, against Arthur's wish. And from here on, Dutch starts doubting Arthur's loyalty. After Micah's manipulation, after he replaced Hosea as the right-hand man for Dutch. And on the other hand, Arthur becomes concerned that Dutch is no longer Dutch he knew before, as he increasingly resorts to murder and paranoia of everything around him, and abandoning all the ideals he used to believe in. Going into chapter 6, which is the last one, Arthur discovers that he is having tuberculosis, and he doesn't have much time. And I do believe that this chapter is the most well-written piece I have ever seen in a video game. The way Arthur's character shifts and the gameplay plays a role of how the story progresses, as if you played more honorable role you might get a better ending. So basically the story changes as you play in a particular way. The major elements are still there, as we go to see while analyzing this chapter. It is just different each time you make a decision. Anyway, after Arthur finds out that he is sick, he takes a pledge to himself without saying it out loud that he won't say to anyone in the camp that he is sick, but the consistent coughs do give it away. And he also pledged that no matter what, the gang is no more, and he takes upon himself to help the people he cares about to basically run away and have a better life. Especially John, as he have a family consists of Abigail, his wife, and his son Jack. Several gang members have already left. In the other hand, Dutch and Micah are arranging one last heist of an army payroll train. Arthur helps with the heist even though he is still doubting Dutch, progressing more. Dutch executes Cornwell and blaming him for Pinkerton's actions. Later on, Dutch runs a plan with the Native American rebellions against the army as a way to roll over their radar, just for the plan to be a disaster and a massive shootout starts. Later on, Dutch and Arthur went into the office in order to find the state bonds that worth a couple of thousands of dollars, or even more. This gives hope to Arthur and Dutch, as finally they can rest after all this mess, but that won't easy, as more of the army are trying to kill Dutch and Arthur. After a shootout, Dutch is trying to run. As Arthur is following him, a hot pipe bursts open, knocking Arthur down. In that moment, couple of the army enters and it captures Arthur. As he calls Dutch desperately for help, we see glimpse of Dutch walking out and leaving Arthur to his inevitable demise. Thankfully, the son of the Native Americans leader shows up and helps Arthur to escape, but he gets shot. When the two walks outside, Dutch acts as if nothing happened there, but Arthur clearly knows that Dutch left him there to die. And here, we see that Arthur ain't believing Dutch anymore, and the whole image of Dutch being the leader and his idol basically shattered. But he keeps that to himself and convinces John to get the money that Dutch is hiding and run away with his family. Later on, the rest of the gang goes to Saint Denis to meet the army payroll train, but the train isn't stopping there, so they had to chase and jump into the train. After a shootout, John gets injured and Dutch says to Arthur to focus and he will help John. Arthur goes off and robs the train and gets the money, and after he meets Dutch and asks him about John, Dutch simply says that he tried but John couldn't make it and he is dead. Clearly, Arthur doesn't believe him, but he can't risk anything. After the gang stole the money from the train, Arthur learns that Abigail was captured by Milton. When they try to speak to Dutch in order to go and save her, Dutch refuses. And in here, Arthur gives zero shits about loyalty anymore, and he goes with Sadie Adler disobeying Dutch's orders. After a massive shootout, Milton confronts Arthur, revealing that Micah is the one who has been informing the Pinkertons since their return from Guarma. And I didn't include this before, not sure why, but Molly O'Shea, one of the gang's members, ran into the gang drunk and claiming that she told the Pinkertons about the gang because she loved Dutch and he barely gives a fuck about her, to get shot by Susan Grimshaw with a shotgun leading to her death. So when Arthur learned that Molly wasn't the rat but Micah is, the news shocked Arthur, but he quickly woke up as Abigail killed Milton. As the story falls upon us, Arthur tells the women to leave for safety, bidding them farewell. Then finally the gang collapses when Arthur returns to camp, and he starts accusing Micah for betrayal. Dutch didn't understand what is happening, just to be surprised of John returning back being angry at him because he left him to die. Dutch, Bill, Javier and Micah turn on Arthur and John when the Pinkertons arrive. A shootout starts, but the six manages to flee into the wilderness. One of the saddest moments that this game has is, and I am not sure if this cutscene is triggered if you are playing honorably or not, but when John and Arthur are running with their horses from the Pinkertons, a sniper hits Arthur's horse, and if you bond with the horse until the max level, which is basically the level 4, Arthur says in a sad tone to his horse, "Thank you. And I swear you can have a cold stone heart, but you are going to fucking cry after seeing your horse die."
This way! Come on, brother. Let's go.
Give me a second.
Come on! Push, Arthur!
Thank you.
Arthur! Come on, Arthur.
Here, the game gives you the opportunity to how the game should progress, either by saving John some time to run away while facing the Pinkertons or going back to the money. I won't cover everything, but rather what I had in my playthrough. After choosing saving some time for John, you start shooting your way to death basically, while you give John some time to run away. And if you choose either options, Micah will eventually ambushes Arthur and you start fighting him. After a brutal fight, Dutch from all the people intervenes the fight, and somehow Arthur convinces him to abandon Micah and leave. And here where the honor gameplay plays a role. If you are playing honorably, Arthur dies to tuberculosis in peace under the sunrise. Otherwise, Micah shoots you right in the head.
You're not better than me, Morgan. Whatever you say, you fool. Damn you. Damn us both!
And here where the Red Dead Redemption 2 story ends. You can totally stop playing the game here, as I feel that the story is so satisfying, and the character development of Arthur and Dutch are one of the best ones I have ever seen. Also, Sadie Adler. But you can still keep playing the 2 episodes of the epilogue. Not much is happening here. You play as John after all what happened, and you try to find Micah to revenge, basically. But more importantly, start a family with Abigail and Jack and live in peace. And that is what you do mostly in the first episode, as you start working on local branch. John is forced immediately into fighting back against a group of outlaws threatening his employer. Abigail leaves him with Jack as she believes that John can never escape his old life. So in order to gain her trust once again, he buys a piece of land in Blackwater with the intention of turning it into a ranch. He reunites with Uncle in Charles and Sadie, who helped John build in his ranch. Eventually, Sadie comes across an information of Micah's location, and the gang leaves to revenge for Arthur's death. After arriving at the camp, Sadie and Charles are wounded by Micah's men, forcing John to continue alone. After a shootout, John confronts Micah, and quick shootout starts, and you cannot do anything to kill Micah here. After a little while, John is shocked as he discovers that Dutch is working with Micah, and with no actual reason that comes to my head other than Dutch has lost his mind. He shoots Micah and gives time for John to finish him, and then Dutch just leaves without a word. John learns that Micah had recovered the money stash left behind in Blackwater and uses it to pay off his loan. Later on, John marries Abigail and the story ends. Of course, hearing this is nothing like playing the game and finishing it. The details that Rockstar did put with some amazing gameplay mechanics are such an amazing feature that helps the storytelling, and the voice acting is one of the best ones I have heard since The Witcher 3. Overall, Rockstar did make such an amazing immersive world for everyone to discover and play, and I cannot wait for the next title that Rockstar is going to release, as I believe it is going to be amazing as well.